everybody. I'm Dr. Christy Taylor, founder of Work Solutions and Work Global News Magazine, and I am excited today to bring you another edition of our Changemaker series where we are highlighting some dynamic people. And today we are featuring another speaker from our Prescription for Career Success Conference, R. Harrison Baxter. He is a transformational leadership expert, speaker, and author with a deep focus on reflective listening and the neuroscience of leadership. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself, and let's just go from there. I'm excited to introduce you today.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I appreciate it. My name again is R. Harrison Baxter. The R stands for Ray. So in speaking, you and I can please use my first name. And very simply, I train teams and leaders to unlock high performance through reflective leadership. That's what I do.
I think it's so powerful because I think I talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and a big part of that is taking time to stop and reflect. Now, I want to talk about your backstory here, and then we're going to get to all of that because we know that when we go into these spaces as coaches and trainers, that a lot of the work that we do is coming from experience. There's something that shapes our story. So growing up in the Bronx, that's a big part of your story, during such a challenging time. How did those early experiences shape your passion for leadership and reflective listening?
Growing up in the Bronx, it wasn't just challenging as it was defining for me. Mm-hmm. I saw firsthand what happens when people are marginalized, when they're not heard, when communities are dismissed, and when survival replaces connection, right? That's big. Those experiences shaped me. I kept busy because I was always involved in different things. I got involved in music. I played ball. I was involved in clubs and teams. So that kind of kept me off the streets per se. But you always had to know who was in the neighborhood. You had to know the guy that was selling drugs down the street. You had to know those people because those are the people that if they recognize that you have some potential, they left you alone and they protected you, believe it or not. When I was in school, I got involved in some leadership roles that I wasn't a leader at first. I had to learn my way in. But when I became a leader, I learned that leadership wasn't about titles. It's about presence. That's the most important thing. I watched so many of my friends fall through the cracks because no one cared enough. No one cared long enough, let's put it that way, to see their potential. And leadership begins with listening, being both seen and being heard. Yeah. And that shows up in everything that I do. So whether I'm mentoring kids, or dealing with corporate clients, the idea is to create a psychologically safe space. And basically, my past didn't just build resistance; it gave me a lens of leadership, and that lens of leadership is grounded in humanity.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that because you talk about the importance of listening and being present as a leader. And I wholeheartedly agree that leadership is not about titles. When you can literally lead from the space that you're in. Now, one part of your story is you talk a lot, and I've seen this just even on your Facebook page with some of the mentoring that you even do now. You have mentioned in telling your story of how football, music, and mentorship, all of this was pivotal in helping you to rise above adversity. Now, when we talk about the stories that shape us, can you share a specific moment during that time that really shifted your perspective on resilience?
Yeah, I got a lot of that from my dad. My dad was a bus driver for a local company here in New York City. But my dad was a union rep. He was a union chairman of that job, and he had been elected every 2 years for 25 years. So that's pretty impressive in and of itself. But I remember as a child that there were a lot of mail and a lot of phone calls that were not very nice, a lot threatening to him, a lot threatening to me as his child, as his son, and his only son at that. So dad was always protective. I remember a particular incident where dad had gotten me into a day camp that he was driving for at the time through the bus company. and someone had cut the brakes on the bus. And I was with a bunch of kids on the bus. We were rolling backwards after a stop that was made on a highway. And if it wasn't for one of the bus drivers that were in that particular camp, who knows what would have happened to a bunch of us on that bus. So dad was always very protective of me, but at the same time, he was protective of his membership. And that resilience, that persistence, he even wound up taking those guys on strike for 6 months. That's how deep, particularly in the 70s, if you lived in New York before the Taylor law, there were groups that would go on strike simply to be heard. You know, they wanted more money, they wanted more benefits. And that was a way to get the attention of the leaders at the time. So dad took a bunch of guys. I think that, if I remember correctly, he had well over 500 men that were working with him at the time and that he was elected by. It took them on strike for 6 months. That's big. That's huge. So my family really had no income, just like everybody else. Dad was struggling. Mom was struggling. That taught me resilience. That taught me persistence. That taught me leadership. Because on the other end of it, Dad got a lot of offers. Hey, from the other side. And he could have easily said, hey, I'll take this underground stuff and support my family. But he never did. He never did. So, go ahead.
Well, I want to continue this conversation because I want to take a look at, you talk so much about your dad and how this helped you to build resistance. And I think it really, when I read about you and the things I've learned about you and working with you over the course of planning for this event, you really have an approach that focuses on uh, empathy and reflective listening. And
Yeah.
so, and as you continue to share this story, what inspired you to focus on these qualities? And I kind of get the sense that some of it is from the experiences that you had growing up. But why, you focus so much on these qualities, and from your perspective and experiences, how do they transform the way that leaders connect with their teams? Because that's a part of your story.
That's a good question. My focus was born from lived experience, both in personal and professional journeys. I've seen what happens when leaders lead by force instead of presence. And I've been in those environments where people were overlooked, people were dismissed. I've been one of those people that was overlooked and dismissed a long time ago. And I realized early on that being heard and being seen and being understood is actually life changing. You know, I noticed that the most effective leaders aren't the ones that are the loudest, but the ones that really make people feel safe and confident and valued. And that's what reflective listening does. It builds trust at the neurological level.
Mm.
So so when a leader listens with intention and kind of mirrors what they hear, it activates the brain's mirror neurons. It activates the brain. And that's where you feel that warm and fuzzy feeling that you get when you connect with somebody. That's neuroscience in action.
I want you to go back to, kind of what you were saying about your dad and the experiences that you had growing up. We talk about building resiliency, and when you make that link to the empathy piece, right, and
Mhm.
reflective listening, because like you said, right there, this all comes from your lived experiences. So it seems like you had a father who was very empathetic and understanding, right?
Yeah,
And those were his traits as a leader. And so,
yeah,
can you just touch a little bit on how that flows into what we're going to talk about next, is which is your book? But I just want to make sure you touch on that because, right, your those pieces of you talking about empathy and reflective listening, that connection is really made through the adversity that you experienced in watching your father
yeah.
lead, right?
Hmm. A lot of it is, and I talk about my dad a lot. I guess he's kind of front of mind for me because I take care of him now. He's 97, so I'm his caretaker. I take care of him, and I think about a lot of those things.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going through your own adversity, when you're going through, when I'm dealing with clients, I think about the times and the traits that kind of shaped me through my dad and his work and his beliefs. And I guess I am the product. I am my father's son. I guess I
Yeah.
am that product, right? But as it relates, say you mentioned the book, The Reflective Advantage. Uh, I just believed in writing that book that it's so important to be able to lead, but more to listen to lead.
Mm-hmm.
And most leaders don't do that. Case in point, when someone becomes a manager, for example, they're brought in to deal with a team. But a lot of those folks, they're so involved in the work in managing and thinking they're managing the team, they're managing the work, they're not managing the team. And there's a difference in managing a team and seeing who the workers are, and opposed to getting the work done. Because I can get the work done, but are they happy? Are these people even functioning at a tenth of their potential? Do they have an opportunity to actually go further or even enhance your job as a manager, making you look good? A lot of managers don't think that. A lot of corporate people don't think that. A lot of CEOs don't think that. And that's so important in leadership. You
Yeah,
have
I
to
mean,
manage people.
we've already kind of started touching base about the book, but let's take a deep dive into, you talked a little bit about what motivated you to write that book, but what can readers expect as they go through that book, and what's one key takeaway from the book that you believe that every aspiring leader should know?
So the first part of your question, why I wrote the book
I
in
think you've
20,
answered that though.
well,
I
I
think you've
did and I
answered
didn't,
that.
but let me
Yeah.
go a little deep dive on that, because in 22, the end of 22, I had to stop working because I ended a contract actually with a major company in Connecticut. There was a contract trainer, a corporate trainer, and I am that by trade. But I had to replace both hips, so I had dual hip replacement surgery at the beginning of 23. Took me out for quite a while, at least 3 to 4 months, and so I'm sitting on my bun and I'm thinking, well, I don't want to waste time. I had to give up clients. I couldn't do the things that I normally do. I couldn't train anybody. So what can I do? And I thought about, well, I could write. I could write about my experiences. And I just started writing. And that's how the Reflective Advantage came to be. I thought of why why leadership for me is the way it is. Why did I tend to listen? What is the change? Um, what changes can I make as for myself and for others? And that's why the book was written. The book was written so that people can understand that being a reflective leader is more effective than being a leader that is forceful, that kind of makes that feels that they have to change the temperature of the room all the time. You can change the temperature of the room by getting to know your people, by listening to your people, by empathizing with your people. So you change the room together. You change the temperature of the room together. And that's what's important. And that's why I
What's the
wrote
one
the book.
takeaway? What's the one takeaway that any leader who reads this book?
Good question. Change talk. I started to allude to that. So, what is change talk? If you and I are having a conversation and you tell me what's wrong, the first thing that anyone will do in the conversation is give their perspective. You tell me, well, and I don't like the weather. It looks like it's going to rain, and I don't know what to do, and blah, 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 blah. And the first thing that comes out of my head was, well, bring an umbrella with you, or something to get you to get through your day. But
Mhm.
I don't know what made you do that. I don't know what made you think that way. And what change talk does, if someone is using reflective techniques, they're going to listen first before they involve themselves in change talk. They're not going to actually make a change or give someone the identity that for me, for example, that I know more than you. The auto-reflective listening is for you to know that I hear you, that I understand you. And once I do that, once we have that conversation and we're on an even keel, you're not here. More importantly, I'm not here. We're here. So there's an exchange. Once that I know that you know that there's an exchange, then I can begin to insert change talk. But change talk does not mean that I'm giving you an answer. Change talk simply means that I am giving you hints so that you can create the answer yourself. So the answer comes from you, doesn't come from me.
So you're always in the mode of coaching, because we know as coaches, we don't give people the answer. I think career coaching is a little bit different because I'm always having to play the role of advisor, right? This is how you should do your resume. But from a regular coaching standpoint, we know that we have to ask the questions to let people come to the conclusion themselves. Now,
Right.
your work, it really incorporates a lot of neuroscience-based strategies for leadership development. I want to touch on that a little bit. Can
Okay.
you explain how understanding the brain enhances the leader's ability to foster trust and innovation within their team?
Yeah. Simply put, if a leader does not understand their people, how can you lead? So knowing the brain's functionality, knowing neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is simply the ability of the brain to learn new items, learn new things. And you begin neuroplasticity as a child and carry it through your entire life. So the simple fact that I think I know more than you doesn't apply or shouldn't apply as a leader. What should happen is that using neuroplasticity, using change talk, using other reflective techniques, I want to get a better outcome from our relationship. So I'm going to use those techniques to help you improve. And what I found actually by employing those techniques, not only does it improve uh, production, but it improves relationships. It's used in, now I have to admit, when I began to learn this technique, I had a girlfriend at the time and she knew what I was doing. And I didn't do it very well. She thought every time we were having a conversation, I was trying to analyze her. If you're not careful about these techniques, it can seem that way. So it's very easy to lose someone if you use it incorrectly. But
Mm-hmm.
using it correctly helps to bridge a gap, and that gap will help you lead. And once you're on that path, you're leading with empathy, you're leading with resilience, you're leading together with your team. That's the most important part.
Um, and I just want to go just one more question, kind of takes a deep dive into your own story, because as you said, like, this comes from your experience growing up. You wrote this book because you had a background and have a background in training and as a coach. And so you're writing from your own experience, but even in your own experience, you've been really open about the setbacks, just like you just shared with us what motivated you to write the book. So you've been pretty open about the setbacks that you faced
Yeah.
during even your academic journey and life and career journey. How did overcoming failure change your outlook on leadership and influence the way that even you coach today? Because we're gonna talk about two different initiatives that you have, right? But how did your own experience, right, influence how you coach your clients?
Okay. That academic experience that you can read about in the bio that I wrote is the very first time I've admitted that in 20 odd years. I've never admitted that to anyone before. But I felt that in writing that, it was important as I go on with my work. And here's why. If you're becoming a reflective leader, you also have to be honest. You have to be honest about your journeys, and you can't hide. So if you haven't read it, I'll briefly describe it here. I started college back about the end of '83, and by '85, I was on not just academic suspension, but actually kicked out of school. And the reason for that simply was because I caught mononucleosis and had a bad experience with an academic advisor telling me, well, you can make up everything in one semester. So I was trying to do complete one semester of midterms and finals. Well, actually, 2 semesters of midterms and finals in one semester. And it's impossible. So I was basically taking 30 credits in 4 months. And I flunked everything. Everything. And here's someone that was, I got 22 awards in high school coming out of school. I got college scholarships. I got football awards. I had opportunities to go to school for free, to play ball at big time schools. And here I am at a smaller school and I'm flunking out because I got bad advice, because I thought I was better and I could just ride above everything and finish everything and not know how. So, being a leader, being a reflective leader, you have to admit your own fallacies, your own faults. And I had to admit that. And I did that at the end of writing for you and writing that book. It made me understand that this is one thing I had to come to grips with.
Yeah. Uh, Listen, and I also think that we also got to take into account with their pieces that we have to be careful of even the people who advise us, because they might sometimes they have our best interest in mind, but it's not always a well thought out, right? And
Right.
so any college advisor that will put you in a position to say take all of these courses uh, probably didn't think that all the way through. So look, failure. I like to say, what's this? Les Brown, is that his name? To speak, he used to go to my church, and one of the things he always say is, failure is a tuition that we pay for success. And I
Absolutely.
repeat that so much. That failure is tuition that we pay for our success. In your case, literally, right? Because it shaped you into who you went on to become. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that any of us, as we go through this journey of life, all of this, it's like, why do you have such a passion for as a career coach? You know, why? Because I've worked in bad environments, right? And I really do believe that those of us who are working in social impact spaces deserve to not only work in good and healthy environments that thrive, we are focused on making an impact. So it's really important that the internal is a reflection of the external
Right.
persona that we're trying to present, right? So we all have things that shape our stories and shape our experience, and that's just part of them. Now you talked about all of the opportunity you had. We touched on music and football and all those. Let's talk about some of the initiatives that you do now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a master's in strategic leadership.
Right.
You're pursuing a PhD in performance psychology, but you're still doing all these. I mean, recently we've had to reschedule this interview because you were over traveling in Africa. You know, you're doing all this work. You have initiatives like the Bronx Rebels football club. You've
Right.
impacted countless lives. I want you to talk a little bit about that, some of the travel that you're doing internationally, and what are the lessons that what lessons from working with underserved communities have really stayed with you. And this is something I'm passionate about because, again, my whole center of what I do here at work is being a prescription for change, right? That's why people always that's what the RX stands for, being
Mm-hmm.
the prescription. Okay, so talk about some of these initiatives that you work with and some of the things that you do, and how it's impacted you.
Sure. So I've had the opportunity to speak internationally. I was in India. I've been to Africa. I've been to London. I may do Dubai later this year. There are two reasons why I extend overseas. One, I got to be very honest about this. As an African American male, your voice gets lost here in the States. So I figured by let me go overseas and try to make a difference, because at that point, perhaps, and it's happened, my work is being recognized overseas and now it's beginning to be recognized here. So that's one. Two, I had the opportunity to speak in front of over 500,000 people in India. That's a life-changing experience. And that also was an impetus for the book. Uh, in Africa, I had a chance to address several hundred people at different conferences. Uh, I've spoken internationally, virtually as well. And people want to hear what makes leaders tick and what is better for leaders than the examples that we're showing in the news every day, particularly now.
Mhm.
In Africa, for example, Nairobi, I was in Nairobi. They are screaming for people that have this knowledge to, whether it be virtually or in person, just make the appearance to teach it. They want to know what's different about it. They want to know what leadership is. They want to know why leadership is. We see all of the negativity that's brought forth on television, what they show us on the screens.
Mhm.
My God, when I went to Nairobi, it's so different. You would think that the streets are clean. There are not animals roaming around and all this other nonsense. And the people are beautiful. So yeah, it gave me a chance to expound on my skill, gave me a chance to speak, gave me a chance to extend my platform, but more importantly, it gave me a chance to teach and train. And that was the most important thing for me.
I think a big part of that when we talk about being the prescription for change is that we have to realize it's so much what you just said, right? That we digest so much information just from what's being presented to us, right? And that people should just be empowered to do their own research and not be scared of to go out and get experiences, especially because we're entrepreneurs. To go out and get experiences that's going to build, but allow you to live a passion where you can continue teaching and training others. So we're getting close to the end of the interview, and I want to talk a little bit about here. One last question for you, and then we'll just touch a little bit on what you're going to do for the conference that we have coming up. And
Mm-hmm.
you are a part of our prescription for success book, so we'll be continuing working together later on into this year.
Looking
I want to
forward
talk a
to it.
little bit about as your continued expansion, right? As you continue to expand your impact globally, what you just touched on, what's your ultimate vision for leadership in the next decade? Where would you like to take your business and as you continue to expand?
That's a good question. Wow. I think my ultimate vision for leadership over the next decade is more of a global shift, right? From command to connection. That's what I'd like to see. From control to compassion. Leadership shouldn't be defined by hierarchy. It should be defined by humanity, and where presence and empathy and reflective listening actually become the core of competencies and not optional extras. See, this is what I've learned. I think we've entered a time where trust is currency. It's so important. And leaders who create that through reflective leadership, they build stronger teams and they unlock higher levels of creativity and psychological safety. So that's just a kind of leadership that it doesn't change corporations, it changes cultures. So that's what I'd like to see.
Can you touch a little bit on what you're going to be speaking about at our upcoming conference? But again, guys, I say this every interview. It doesn't matter because if you're listening to this today, tomorrow, after the conference, the advice that are in the conversations that we have in this Changemaker series are really timeless. But Ray, go ahead and touch a little bit about what you're going to be speaking on in the conference, uh, and then tell people where they can find you. And of course, we'll have all of his information posted in the description.
Thank you, Christy. Well, the I'm going to talk about what I call the echoes of empathy, which
Mhm.
is really the basis of everything I do with reflective listening and mainly reflective leadership. And it was actually the very one of the very first keynotes that I gave,
Mhm.
but it is the base keynote for everything that I do. So that's what I'll be performing. And where you can find me, my website is www.thelistentoleadsuite.com. On that suite, you could find some of my talks, but also the workshops that I do. I have 3 signature or key workshops in addition to other smaller workshops that I do that you can sign up for. You can get in touch with me through that site, or if you want to email me directly, you can email me at Ray, R-A-Y, at rharrisonbaxter.com.
Thank you so much for today's fantastic interview. You can check out this interview on our YouTube channel, and we recently just expanded our platform. So we are on Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, as well as iTunes. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. We'll continue to promote and celebrate these change makers who are having an impact on the lives of everyday people. And don't forget that I know that there are millions of us who want to change the world, but it really just starts by being a great human being and changing the world one person at a time. So be sure to check out this interview. Check out the Prescription for Career Success Summit, April 26th and 27, 2025. And then check out the book that's dropping in the next few weeks, and we'll be again still collaborating over the course of the year, promoting the book and doing some other fantastic things together. Okay, thanks for tuning in and have a great day.